Captain Midnight.
This video is brought to you by Nebula. So I turned out to be one of many creators who made a Madam Web video last week. And I don't just mean from other movie-focused creators, I think it broke out of that niche and into just mainstream general discussion. There was a stopping to stare at the car wreck at the side of the road quality to this movie that I think a lot of people found interesting. Didn't really end up helping Madam Web though, as the opening weekend was even lower than Morbius's box office a few years ago. That also generated tons of online conversation that the movie itself was unable to capitalize at the box office. Unlike Morbius though, I'd be a little surprised if Sony convinces itself to re-release Madam Web after it's left theaters, considering how well that went for Morbius. It feels like the reception from your average moviegoer is notably negative, even when compared to just your average superhero dud. Madam Web received a C+ cinema score from people walking out of the theater, which may not seem that bad at first blush, like maybe you're even surprised it's that high, but some context is necessary here. The Eternal's got a B. I bring that up not because I think cinema scores are a great metric for judging a movie's quality. I think they're actually pretty terrible at that. But it is a really good indicator on if people felt like they got the movie that was advertised to them in the trailers. And Madam Web, with its, let's be honest, incredibly dishonest marketing campaign that often centered around the characters being in superhero costumes and doing superhero stuff that wasn't in the movie, left a lot of people feeling very ripped off. It's a classic Kangaroo Jack situation. I will never forgive that kangaroo for not talking. But look, I'm not just here to talk about how poorly received Madam Web has been. I'm sure most of you are aware of that. I'm here to talk about how I think Sony's live action efforts in 2024 may actively be hurting the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Now, I know what some of you are thinking, that the MCU is doing a perfectly fine job of that themselves with their recent projects, and, fair enough. But I think it's worth talking about what Marvel is trying to pull off this year and going forward. Disney CEO Bob Iger and others have acknowledged that they think the MCU is releasing too many projects, that they flooded the market, and it was probably time to strip that back. 2024 is supposed to be the year that it all settles down a little bit, at least when it comes to the movies. I know there's still stuff like Echo and Agatha on Disney Plus this year, but in films, there's just Deadpool 3, which is a fairly safe bet as far as these things go and could win them back a lot of goodwill if it's really well liked. On paper, this seems like a good idea for Marvel, solving a how could I miss you if you never go away situation, where audiences could find themselves more in the mood for an MCU movie after a much longer break than usual. Obviously, the most important thing is that the next MCU movies be, good, but I don't mind there being a healthy absence of them for a while. Or it would be an absence if, Sony didn't decide to do the exact opposite. Madam Web is just the first of 3 Spidey-adjacent live-action movies they're releasing this year, as they're following it up with Kraven the Hunter and Venom 3. If these films are on par with Madam Web, and for the record, I'm not saying they will be, I do really enjoy the goofy Eddie-Venom dynamic in these movies, but if they are, many filmgoers may head into 2025 believing the MCU had an absolutely disastrous past year. Because I am not convinced your average Joe is aware that there's any distinction at all. Maybe if you follow this stuff closely, that sounds ridiculous to you, but I bet a massive number of the casual audience, the people who drove MCU movies to incredible box office success, just really have no idea. And why would they? Sony's co-producing of the MCU Spider-Man has resulted in Tom Hardy's Venom being in No Way Home, and Vulture's baffling appearance in Morbius. They use Marvel in all the marketing for this stuff, and your average person doesn't care about movie studio contracts or who owns what rights. To most, these are just Marvel movies. Toss them on the pile with the others. And in that light, while the MCU movie break may regain some hardcore fan interest, it's likely that a lot of people just won't notice they went anywhere in the first place. It's always been in Sony's best interest to closely align themselves with the MCU and create audience confusion on this front. And my guess is that it really works. Even entertainment press and people who are actually acting in these movies don't seem to know the difference. You have actors like Dakota Johnson and Matt Smith talking about how they spoke with Elizabeth Olsen and Karen Gillan about their experiences working on the MCU before accepting roles in Madam Web and Morbius, despite not being in Marvel-produced MCU movies. Entertainment Tonight asked Sydney Sweeney how it felt to be in the MCU, and she responded to it like she was. And it's just speculation, but you have to wonder if Dakota Johnson firing her agents right after the Madam Web trailer dropped had something to do with the feeling that she'd been kind of duped here. I'm not even really trying to give these actors a hard time. I don't expect them to care about this stuff. Gwyneth Paltrow was always good as Pepper Potts, and she didn't even know she was in a Spider-Man movie. But if even they can't bother understanding the distinction, you can't count on most people to. I don't want to make it sound like I'm complaining on behalf of the MCU here. I just find it interesting and maybe a little funny that their plans to slow down are being totally derailed by Sony going all in on these things right as the superhero movie decline really started to go into full swing. So where does this go from here? Well, if Kraven and Venom 3 are disasters, I feel like the MCU should try to make an active effort to make that distinction clearer for people. Have Kevin Feige talk about it. Have actors mention it in interviews. Now maybe they're not allowed to do this. I have no idea. These studio contracts are probably longer than War and Peace, so it wouldn't surprise me. I think the Venom cameo in No Way Home really complicates things, and we're still not sure if that's going to actually amount to anything. But as of right now, that cameo and the Vulture stuff I think are looking like a big mistake for Marvel. Tying them closely into this Sony Spider-Man-ish universe that is publicly embarrassing itself on a massive scale. I can't imagine Disney is happy about that, but Spider-Man is Spider-Man, so at the time, these cameos were likely seen as worth it for them. And the thing is, specifically with Web and Morbius, and even Venom Let There Be Carnage to a lesser extent, is the idea of a Spider-Man villains universe without Spidey a good one? No, absolutely not. But the characters they've chosen to utilize within that bad choice make it even more strange and kind of doomed. Like Venom, hey, obvious pick. People love Venom, great character, only logical to start there. But Morbius? Madam Web? Kraven is a little more understandable, but still, it feels like after everyone's favorite symbiote, they just kind of put a bunch of character names into a hat and picked out from it at random. They made a Madam Web movie, already a terrible idea, without any of the core characteristics of Madam Web. Just so weird. It would be one thing if Sony was just handing these characters to really interesting teams and directors and letting them craft something entirely new and interesting with it. That I could at least respect. Get some big name stars, some really great directors, and just let them run wild with it. Source material be damned. But that's not what's happening here. These movies feel studio noted and reshot within an inch of their life. And to what end? Replacing all the villains' dialogue with bad ADR was such an obviously disastrous choice, but someone, somewhere at Sony, decided that that was worth it, that it was necessary because it was just that important to get this story changed. And I am just so confused as to why. I guess what I'm really saying is release the S.J. Clarkson cut. Okay, I'm getting off track here. My point is that these last few Sony Spider-related movies, their stellar animated stuff aside obviously, have been a disaster for Marvel. It's created brand confusion, and in a time where the MCU has made some notably bad films themselves, they're gonna find that building that trust back with their audience, it's gonna be an even bigger uphill battle thanks to Sony's complete inability to make Madam Web and Morbius just normal bad, instead of notably, staggeringly bad. Now, how much of an impact this will have does remain to be seen, but I think it might quietly be a bigger deal for the MCU than people really realize. So, what do you think? Do you think Morbius and Madam Web do affect how people see the MCU? Do you have stories of loved ones or friends not knowing the difference? I'd love to hear it all down in the comments. I talk a lot about mainstream movies on my channel, but I think it's important to explore the indie side of film too. One video that does that really well is Broey Deschanel's Taboo on Screen, which takes a look at more controversial filmmakers like John Waters. It's an original you can find right now on my streaming service, Nebula. I have some originals on Nebula as well, and my videos are always ad-free. There's also great creators like Lindsay Ellis uploading exclusive videos, along with Nando V Movies, Wendover Productions, Be Kind Rewind, and hit series like Jetlag. Plus, right now you can get a lifetime subscription for only $300. That's right, lifetime. There's zero catch there. And I think that's the kind of offer that really sets Nebula apart. Of course, you can also get Nebula for 40% off an annual plan, basically just over $250 a month. There's really no wrong answer here. So check out that link down in the description and start watching all of my stuff ad-free on Nebula.
Here's a special tip for the fellas and girls who have not already joined Captain Midnight's new 1940 Flight Patrol. You'd better hurry up and join at once, because there's a big adventure ahead. The thing to do now is to get started, because we're going to have not only barrels of fun, but loads of free gifts and prizes too.